we are joined by Antonin Garrone, who works at Etalab, which is the company, well, the organization, I should say, that manages the French open data portal, data.gouv.fr. And earlier, a couple of months ago, we talked about the portal already in one of the Future of Open Data episodes, Future of Open Data portal episodes. And today, as a follow-up to that, we'll be talking about open data best practices and also COVID-19. Antonin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm Antonin Garrone. So, as you said, I work at Etalab, which is a department under the authority of the French Prime Minister in charge of open data and data strategy in general. Myself, I'm more focused on the reuses of open data. But today I'll be talking about how we deal with data regarding the epidemic and how it helps us to renew our policies in terms of public policy steering.
Okay. As a note to the audience, I haven't mentioned this before, but we're recording this session. So afterwards, we'll be promoting it on our YouTube and social media channels, so you can find it there. And please mute yourself for the duration of the session. If you have a question, though, please feel free to ask it in chat or by raising your hand, and then we can address it intermittently. But we also have some dedicated time for Q&A afterwards, so feel free to use either option. Antonin, I would leave the floor to you now.
Okay, thank you very much. I might have a few connection issues, but it seems to be working now. So
so far we're good.
Yeah, let's hope we don't have any problem with that. So as I said, Etalab coordinates the design and the implementation of the French state's data strategy. We work on data opening and data circulation, but we also manage the national open portal that is data.gouv.fr. And we also do data exploitation. We have a lab of data science and artificial intelligence. And more generally, we try to foster innovation and openness within public action. Now let's talk a bit about what we did regarding COVID-19 data in France. Why is it important to open those data? First of all, of course, because it provides factual information to citizens, but also policymakers. And those data are essential for researchers, journalists, companies, and a lot of different stakeholders. Doing that, we faced several challenges. The first one would be the organizational challenges, because we have to do a lot of coordination among a lot of various different actors, public actors such as regional health agency, for example, but also private actors such as a laboratory, for example. There are, of course, technical challenges with different data sources, different information system, different formats, etc. And a need to always be adapting ourselves to the situation and to adapt the indicator, for example, to monitor the epidemic. What are the indicators the most accurate to know the reality at a given time, and it always changes. So there's a need of constant adaptation. So what we did quickly in 2020, we opened a lot of different data sets on testing capacities, on hospitalization or ICU capacity, for example. All the different indicators that are used by our government to make decisions, such as positivity rate, for example, but also different data sets on the state's economic aid to companies, data sets on the national contact tracing app. A lot of data sets have been published also by local authorities, such as the local measure, the the obligation to wear a mask, for example, or a lot of different data sets. But there are, of course, not only health data set, but a lot of other data sets that are more or less related to the COVID-19. For example, all the research that have been done regarding the epidemic, for example. It really had a huge impact on the national portal. Firstly, in terms of traffic, we really had a record of both visits and reuses published on the national portal in 2020. For example, in November 2020, we reached 2.3 million unique visitor per month, which was unprecedented for us. More recently, we opened a lot of data regarding vaccination, the number of people vaccinated, the data on the different vaccination center, where they are, their phone numbers, etc. That data on vaccine stocks and deliveries, depending on what type of vaccine it is, etc., where they come from, and also data on vaccination appointments, which is pretty interesting because those are data owned by private companies, such as appointment companies, such as Doctolib, for example. So those are data gathered by the public service, but are produced by private companies. So it really shows, again, the need of coordination between different types of stakeholders. There are a lot of more data to come. We speak data soon on new vaccine, very interesting data sets on the concentration of COVID-19 in wastewater that is used to make prediction of the situation. New data on anonymized contact tracing data, and also more comprehensive data on the capacity of the health system. If I try to resume what we learned doing that, is the need to be prepared to implement interoperable system of both collection, aggregation, but also publication of data, and to be very organized from the very beginning. At the beginning of the epidemic, we really lacked a comprehensive view of all the data that is produced regarding those matters, but also the operational contact for each data set. We now have a much more better vision, but we're still working on it. But what really changed really is the governance of data and how we are much more in contact with the operational people producing those types of data. But as you know, publishing raw data does not enable citizens to get a grasp on them. So we also worked on data discoverability and understandability, mainly through data visualization. Here you have an example on the government website. It's very simple dashboard of the most important indicators that we deem most important indicators at a certain given time. But we also developed a much more comprehensive dashboard on COVID-19 data, which gather all the different indicators, as I said, that are used by the government to make decisions, data on hospital, on death, of course, all those kind of different data, but also on the vaccine and on tests, etc. And you can also always zoom in and look in your how is it going in your department, etc. Here you have an example of because the dashboard is always evolving. You have an example of a few information on the vaccine we published recently, the number of doses, attributed, the number of appointments that are going to be in the following weeks. Also, in terms of logistic, how many vaccines do we have in stock? Are they Pfizer, are they Moderna, etc. On top of that, there is also a dashboard focusing on the financial support of the state to companies, as I said, and we have all the main financial aid. That would be quite tricky to translate for me, the name of the aid, really, but you can see that in every region and every department how much the state is investing to keep the economy going, and there is a distinction between the types of companies. Is it healthcare? Is it housing? Is it catering, etc. But of course, those data are also used by a lot of different stakeholders, and on our national portal, data.gouv.fr, anyone can publish reuse. There is no editorial catalog. It's just anyone can publish as if it was a social network, really. So we really saw a huge rise of reuses because of COVID-19 data, and some of those reuses are becoming much more popular than the official government dashboard, which is totally fine. Really, it's what we do, so we're really happy with that. Now, say a few words about more in depth about what we learn from the crisis management, and I'll try to resume it with 3 examples. COVID-19 really raised the silence of data in the political debate. It really bring to light a new political interest regarding open data. The first example I will give is that how the government thinks policy decision must be backed by data. The second one would be the new commitment to open new data sets. And the last one will be how it highlights also the need to keep our efforts on improving data quality. So the first one is the public policy barometer. It's a tool that enables to see all the different policies implemented by the states in your region, in your department, in a transparent manner, and really shows how open data can be used as a result-oriented policies. Is both a dashboard and a list of datasets that are published. All the datasets used on the dashboard are, of course, published as open data. What is interesting regarding COVID-19 is that it was built in part thanks to the new interministerial collaboration we made during the crisis. For example, with the head of the government website, which is in charge of the national information, and Etalab. But it's also interesting to see that it is the same open source framework that we used for the COVID-19 dashboard that was used for this public policy barometer. So this barometer has 8 thematics. On every thematic, there are a lot of different indicators. You have ecological transition, employment and economy, health and disability, education, culture, public services, security and housing. And those 8 thematic, as I said, are declined into different indicators and try to resume most of the government action and show are we doing well in those regards. Here you can see an example of the dashboard. Here it's the bike lane the indicator here is the kilometers of backlane by region, and then you can zoom in, of course, see how is it going in your department, and it also helps to compare maybe discrepancies between departments, etc. And a lot other stakeholders can take those data and compare them to other data, maybe to give another view on how it is going. And it has been done on the bike plan data already, which was, and this dashboard was published just a few months ago, so it's pretty recent. The second example is the open data and open source reports. In June 2020, the French Prime Minister launched a mission, asked a French deputy to make a report on the state of open data and open source. And the launch of this mission was really inspired by the importance of open data in regard to the COVID-19 crisis. So once again, this is an initiative that really comes from, in a certain aspect, from what happened regarding open data during the COVID-19 crisis. So following these reports, there is a new commitment, as I say, to implement a stronger open data policy in France, and to open new data sets that are deemed identified as high impact data sets. And each ministry is charged to implement an ambitious roadmap regarding data. Here I just brought a few examples of those data sets. There is school map data, data on driving schools, data on organic farming, the implementation of the recovery plan, or building permits for individual, but there are a lot more data sets, and also some source code or APIs, for example, sorry. And for each of those data sets, there is a calendar associated, so we have a clear view on when those data are supposed to be published. And as I said, the COVID-19 raised again the issue of data quality, and really encouraged us to pursue our efforts at Etalab on this matter. We've been working for a while, and we are still working on what we call data schemas. Schemas are a blueprint of how the data should be structured. It allows increase in the quality of data, especially when a lot of different producers create the same kind of data, but they all have different columns and different way of describing the data, etc. So schemas help aggregating and comparing data. So throughout the years, we developed different tools regarding data schemas in data quality in general. There are schema data.gouv, that is a tool that reference all the public schemas, either that they justify by law, or they just are the most used schemas. There are 14 schemas today, but there are much more that are in development. We try to develop the schemas always with both the producer and the reusers, and to make them validate by the community. That's how schemas really work. It's when everybody thinks it's the best way to describe the data. We also have the Validata tool that enables to check if data conforms to the schemas, which is also a shared project among different actors. And the CSVGG tool that generates a CSV file that conforms to schemas. Those are just a few examples, But now we're working on a tool that tries to ease this process by allowing to do all the process, entering, validate, and publish data following a data schema on straight on the national portal. So this is a tool still in development, but I think it was interesting to give you just a few screenshots of the tool, even though it's really beta right now. So what it looks like is that you can just choose a existing schema. For example, here I have a few different schemas. The first one here is the recharging spot for electric car. So if I choose the schema, for example, then I can have the documentation of the schema, etc. All the different data sets that respect this schema, etc. But I can also enter my own data. There is three choice. Either my data are already structured and I can fill it through form, or I can fill it through spreadsheets. And then in each category, the tool helps you to check all the errors in your data set and tells you how you can fix them, and then can validate your data set and helps you to publish it on the national portal. So this is just an example, but it really shows how, in my mind, how COVID-19 really had a great impact on data, open data policy, and really all the projects that comes from what happened with these in regards to the epidemic. So that's it for me. I think I was pretty fast. I'm sorry, I speak maybe a little too fast, but I'd be really happy to answer any of your question if you have.
Yeah, that's okay. Time-wise, you're doing totally fine. Thank you, Antonin, for this insight. I would like to open the floor to the audience to ask questions. I see Else has her hand up. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thanks a lot for this presentation. You spoke very clear, so no complaints on that. And I'm also happy to see that the COVID crisis at least has some positive effects, and that it generated an extra interest also from your policymakers in the importance of sharing data. I have three questions. Maybe I will ask them one by one. So my first one was, how did you manage to get the data that were produced by private companies? Did they share them voluntarily, or could you oblige them? And if the latter, on which basis?
Thank you very much for this question and for your kind words. In France, the legal framework doesn't make really a distinction between public and private sectors. There's a distinction on the how do you say in English, the public interest. If you have a mission of public interest, you are under the legislation of regarding open data, and you need to publish your data. But in concern of the COVID-19 data, the two example I have is the data on private laboratories that perform tests, and data on the appointment data I told you earlier. And here we didn't have any problem at Etalab, because I think it was already enforced by policymakers at a higher level, and we really didn't have any problem with that whatsoever.
It's very interesting to hear about this notion of public interest. I didn't know you had this in France. Rather to have this than to have the producer which is at European level, I think the case, that it's public institutions have to share and the rest it's different. It's very interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yes.
For example, you have public transport, you have private companies of transportation that are more or less private or more or less public. There always a lot of different types of administration. Maybe we have a lot of different organization, and I guess this this distinction really helps to just look at if the data itself, does it serve a public interest or not.
Very interesting. And then my second question was regarding the applications that you showed that reuse your data. Did the developers could do that all by themselves without your help, or did they reach out because they experienced some problems, for example, with the data quality or with the available formats or so?
Yes. Our main goal at Etalab and at data.gouv is to autonomize as much as possible the producers, because we have so much data sets in our scope. We cannot answer a question on the data itself, and we try as much as possible to just let know the producers, and then it's the job of the producers to fix the error or to take in account the problem. But of course, we try to raise attention on issues when there are, and most of the time when data is of sufficient quality, people just manage to use them themselves. There's a very famous case in France of a student that developed a free website which is called COVID Tracker, and is now much more popular than the official dashboard. You can hear it on the radio, etc. So some reuses really skyrocket in terms of visitors. I guess it is explainable by a lot of different factors, but they are much more agile in general than the official dashboard, and they can do any kind of their own interpretation of the data and try a different type of visualization. So it's very interesting to have this diversity.
And it's very positive also to see that it can be such a success story. So, but just to get a better idea, were there many who came to you with saying like, look, we cannot work with these data because it's a mess, to say it bluntly?
Yes, it happens, especially in COVID-19 data where they are highly regarded. So yes, it happens that mostly on social media, for example, people just ping on Twitter and say there are issues on the data, or you can on data.gouv.fr you can comment directly on the dataset. So on every dataset you can see all the complaints or sometimes suggestion. And then another interesting thing is that you can publish what we call community resource. So if you, for example, you cleaned an official data set, you can publish your cleaned data set to the community, and the community can rely on this data set to build their own services. So there is also the work of the community here. But I would say most of the time that issues are taken into account, especially regarding COVID-19 data.
Okay, and then the last question, if I still can.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Did you do a communication campaign to raise awareness with the public that they could find all these official and trustworthy COVID data in your portal? Or did they just find it like that because you, for example, already had a good reputation?
I would say that in general, the French open data community is pretty active and strong, but we do some editorial work regarding COVID-19 data. What we did is that usually we put all the most important data set on the home page of the website, all the reuse on the home page of the website. We have a specific page on COVID data that gather all the different data sets on the COVID data. We also publish a monthly article where we showcase the most important data set published this month and the most important reuses. And we publish also on social media when there are datasets. For example, the dataset on vaccine was were very awaited by the community. So we, as soon as we had the dataset, we published it on social media, so people know. But sometimes we don't even have the time to publish anything on the social media, because as soon as it's on the website, people already reuse them and publish it on social media. So it depends of that data set. I would say that regarding on COVID data, the main goal is to explain which data can be used for what, rather than say we have data, because there are a lot of people interested in this data. But on some other data sets that are more less known by the public, we do a great deal of work of trying to explain why is it important, how it can be used, etc.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot. That was all for me.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Els. Antonin, I have a question to follow up on this. France did very well last year in the Open Data Maturity Report. And in that, one of the challenges you mentioned was that it's sometimes hard to get open data publishers to actually publish their data. So I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more on how you manage to realize this, and if you have any ideas going forward on how to tackle it.
Yes, so we have a special task force for assisting producers in regards of opening data. We have people that are on the policy side and people on the legal side. And what we do is we try to not only to enforce law, but really to convince by showing use cases how administration can benefit from opening data, obviously. So there are different types of action that provide.
Sorry, you froze, Antonin. I can't hear you anymore. Is this just me, or does everyone else have this too?
I also can't hear him.
Okay.
Just give him a minute.
Can't hear you anymore, Antonin. The challenges of the virtual world. Oh God.
Shall we go for a commercial break? I'm joking.
Yeah.
Oh. Hello, I think I'm back.
You are back. Yes.
Yes, I'm
We
sorry.
should have commercials.
I knew it was going to happen, but I'm glad it didn't happen during the presentation.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I was saying that we provide a set of guides on how and why to open data, and then we try to identify it. We do both. Sometimes we as a team identify the important data sets that should be open and are not, and we contact directly the producer and try to work with them on that. But sometimes it's the producers themselves that contact us to be assisted in their publication process. So it depends. But I would say that the political will helps a lot regarding opening data, and now that the political will is really in favor of opening data, and that it has identified in each ministry's different data sets, and said that you need to implement an ambitious roadmap, and it really helps us to do our work really.
I see a question from, thank you for that, Antonin. I see a question from Els.
Yes, a very short one. The guides you mentioned, they sound very interesting. So the guides on why and how to open up your data, can you share them with us, or are they on your website or so?
Yes, sure. I can share. I'm sorry, they are in French.
Yeah, no worries. We
obviously.
speak French here.
Can I? There's a chat somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, you
No,
can
I
put it
don't
in the
have a
chat,
chat. That's the problem.
I cannot.
There's a chat in this
access the
conversation,
chat.
right? Oh, you cannot get in?
For me, not. I cannot access it.
Okay, Antonin, you can email it to
only
me and then I'll distribute it.
Great.
Yes,
Thanks a lot.
it's you have it maybe? No, not here. It's I'll email it, but it's guides plurals .etalab.gouv.fr, and there are guides on open data, but actually I can share my screen so you can see. I think there are guides of open data, but also more generally on all the activity performed by. Can you see my screen or?
Yes, we can see your screen.
I will quickly
all the activity performed at Etalab. So, for example, on public algorithms or open source softwares, and there's different guides. More, some of them are more technical, and we are currently talking about enriching those guides with more learning content and on reuses and how to reuse open data and how to perform data analysis, etc., which are quite lacking in the guides as of now, because they are more oriented to data producers.
Thanks.
Thank you. Can you also not access the chat, by the way, so you can't see it at all?
No, it says that is only for team members.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
And we don't have teams, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably it. I have a final question from my side. On Etalab, you have a lot of editorial content, so like long reads, more or less, so like featured data stories. I think as one of the few portals in Europe that actually have this. I was wondering, do you have any idea of sort of the needs of your audience, so how well they do, in the sense that maybe we can learn from this and also do this on EDP sites. Do you feel that there's a good uptake of these longer read stories?
This is a very good question, and a question that I don't necessarily have the answers on. The trick thing is that we have a lot of different public on the national portal. We have data producers, which are themselves pretty different. Some are central administration, some are local administration, some are private companies, some are association, etc. And then we have reusers, but we also have what we call curious visitors that comes to have information but does not know how to to use the data itself, but they just navigate on reuses. So it's very hard to distinguish which stakeholder we want to advocate.
Mhm.
Usually, I would say that editorial content are more. It depends. Sometimes when we talk about data portal features, it's really for producers mostly. But
Mhm.
when we do just the news on open data and what data sets have been published, etc., it's more concerning the reusers and the curious visitor in general.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Gianfranco, go ahead.
I have a difficult question perhaps for you, Antonin. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot. In working with France over many years, there is something we've noticed and we liked a lot. That is how strong you are, how assertive you are from a policy perspective, in giving your mandate to your civil servants and your local administration, both using legislative instruments like the French implementation of your own strategy, but also in the language sometimes I notice talking to your colleagues. Again, the question is difficult. Do you think there's a cultural component in that? How do you manage to be so direct and strong in backing open data? Because I'm sure that other countries are a bit softer or not as assertive. Does that sound right to you? How does it work? Give us hints.
Thank you for this question. I feel that there is at Etalab a strong cultures on openness and transparency in general, and maybe I don't really know the difference between country, but maybe there's a difference in that Etalab is really focused on this and was born in during the rise of open government partnership, and this all this ecosystem was open government partnership and open data, and then we expanded to other subjects such as data sharing, data or data exploitation, but our core is open data and transparency and open gov. And that's what we do at Etalab at first. So
perhaps the culture or the open culture is a bit more rooted. You have like a few more years to educate your colleagues to the same kind of mindset.
I guess. And for example, we have a program that we run at Etalab, which is called entrepreneur d'intérêt général, general interest entrepreneurs, which is destined to recruit in administration people from a tech background, developers, data scientists, or designers in every administration. And it's just an example to say that the recruitment of those profiles are both on a technical background and how good they are, what they do, but also how they interact with the philosophy of openness. Do they contribute on open source, for example? How can they imagine opening the data regarding a project, etc. So we really at Etalab have those this mindset, and we try to, when we recruit people and when we interact, we try to have this kind of common cultures between us. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and thank you, Anthony.
Thank you for this. For the sake of time, I think we have to wrap it off. Antonin, I would like to thank you very much for being here today and sharing your insights. I think it was very interesting to us to see what Etalab is doing and specifically what's happening in terms of COVID. So thank you very much for that. I would like to announce to the audience the next data talks that we have coming up. I will share my screen for that quickly. So next week we are joined by Alvaro Rodriguez from EMT Madrid, which is the governmental transport agency of Madrid, and we will share some thoughts on e-mobility. So join us for that next week. To stay on top of it, you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And the recording of this session will be promoted via those channels as well, so you can have a look back and see. Once again, Antonin, thank you very much. If nothing else, I would like to wrap it off.
Thank you very much for having me and for all of your questions. It was very interesting.
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting for us too.